Webinar. It is now live. We are recording. Hopefully people can join now. Okay, so people are joining. We have 5 attendees right now. Oh, my mom's here. Hi, Mom.
Okay. Julia, I think we'll just give, and Bennett, we'll just give it a few minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay.
And if you guys want to check out the website now, we have it up. I sent it in the link, in the chat, mfolnewyork.org/MFOL BU Art Show. That's where we have all the art pieces. So that's what we're going to be sharing during the show.
And I'm going to be sending the program right now. It'll take you to a link to a Google Drive so you can check out the order of events. So that should be in the chat as well now.
And also, if you're a BU student and you want to join our listserv, we just added that link in the chat as well.
And then when everyone speaks, if you could just say kind of where you're from, your age, and then obviously get into whatever you'd like to talk about, but just so everyone can kind of know where panelists are from and all that. But
we're probably going to get started at around 6:05 just to give everyone a few minutes to log on and get settled. And then we'll get going. Also, just so everyone is aware, there is a Q&A after every speaker today, so you will have the option to just put questions into either the chat or there's an option for Q&A. So just if a question pops in your head, there's no dumb questions, feel free to send it our way. Also, this event is going to be recorded, so once it's over, it'll probably be posted hopefully on the website, if not on YouTube or some other platform. So keep a lookout for that after the show.
And only the panelists are being recorded, because the attendees, you're muted and your video's off, but yeah.
Okay, so I think we should go ahead and get started.
All right. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Bennett Owens. I am the founder and president of March for Our Lives Binghamton University. I started this chapter in the fall of 2018 when I was a freshman. Give me 1 second, sorry. I was inspired to join the gun violence prevention movement by the students of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, who turned their pain into action following a tragic mass shooting at our school on the Valentine's Day of 2018. Since that day, young people across the nation have come together to fight for a safer America, to demand action from our elected representatives, because enough is enough. Just a bit about how the show will proceed tonight. We will hear from 9 panelists. The first 5 are artists or writers. Each artist or writer will discuss their work for 5 minutes and then respond to any questions that attendees may have about their work. Attendees can ask questions through the Q&A function while panelists are speaking, and the show should last for about 90 minutes with a 15-minute Q&A with co-founder of March for Our Lives, David Hogg. This show was the most ambitious event by far, which March for Our Lives Binghamton University has hosted since we began in 2018. We have been organizing the show for over a year. Unfortunately, we had to postpone it due to COVID. And as an e-board, we really just came together to make this the best event possible under the circumstances. I'm so grateful for our incredible e-board who worked nonstop to make this event happen. Our goal with this show is to shed light on the importance of art to the gun violence prevention. I hope that our panelists inspire you to get involved in this movement so we can fight together for a safer America, free from the fear of gun violence. If you want to join this fight, be sure to join our listserv through the link in the chat. And together we can end the gun violence epidemic in America, which ends more than 35,000 lives each year. And then lastly, I just want to thank all of our incredible panelists for taking the time to speak with us tonight about their artwork. We're so excited to share your inspiring work with everyone. I'd also like to thank all of the attendees for joining us for the show, and give a huge thank you to former New York State Director of March for Our Lives, Daphne Frias, who was instrumental in organizing the show when we had it planned in the spring. And just one last thank you to Max Rosenblum, who created the website that we'll be showcasing the artwork on tonight. It's so amazing. So with that, we will get on to our first speaker, who will be Alex Colum from, I believe, Tennessee. So go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, hi, I'm Alex. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a 14-year-old from Nashville, Tennessee. For the show, I wrote a poem called I'm Done. And I wrote this on November 14th of last year, which is the day of the Saugus High School shooting in Santa Clarita, California. At school that day, we were taking a benchmark test. And so when I finished, I checked my phone and it was flooded with notifications about a shooting, which was the 44th major school shooting of last year and 5th of that month, according to CNN. I was just immediately filled with such an immense surge of anger. And the only way I could think of to get that out was to write. So I asked my English teacher if I could use my laptop to write something. And then she said yes, and I started writing an essay. And I kept noticing that repeated the same phrase, which was "I'm done." And so I thought I'd give a poem a shot. So that's what I did. This happened. It was cool. But there's a line in here that says, "Done being quiet because I'm scared of what will happen if I'm not." And I think that was the moment that I really realized that I have to use my voice if I want to see meaningful change. And it also was the moment that inspired me to get finally really, truly more deeply involved. So yeah, I'll go ahead and read it, and then I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. I'm done. Done with the shootings. Done hearing about a new shooting every time I check my phone and being broken all over again. Done being told that my anxiety isn't there, that my feelings don't matter, that my paranoia is meaningless. Done hearing about how arming teachers will make it better, a possibility that will only make it worse. Done with the constant fear that I will be shot in a place that I used to love. Done being told that a shooting at my school isn't a real threat. Done with the jokes, done with the fake threats, done with the rinse and repeat cycle of mourning and forgetting. Done being quiet because I'm scared of what will happen if I'm not. Done being broken over and over right after healing. Done looking for exits and hiding spots. Done hating school because I'm scared to be there. Done hearing that another person has been senselessly shot and killed in their school or place of worship or their favorite artist's concert. Done worrying. Done being scared. Done with inaction. Done with complacency. Done with thoughts and prayers. Done. So yeah, I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any. Otherwise, I'm not sure who I'm passing it to next.
Can I just say that I think that it's so beautiful and so touching and makes me want to cry.
Thank you.
Anyone has any questions for them too, you can put it in the chat or you can use the Q&A function.
Yeah, so Alex, do you have any other poems that you've written, or is this kind of like you were just like overwhelmed with feeling and you felt like you needed to put it out there? You're muted.
Sorry. Okay. I have other poems that I've written, but they aren't about gun violence. They're more about there are a couple about my mental health, and then there are a couple just about like the state of the world. But typically when I write them, I do it because I need to get something out.
And also, before the show started, we were remarking that you are so young, and it's very cool to see such a young person getting involved with this. Where do you think this will take you in the long run, if it will take you anywhere?
Yeah, so I've kind of gravitated more lately towards electoral organizing. But I want to get more involved again with March for Our Lives and Students Demand Action now that the election is mostly over. But yeah, I haven't really thought about that much yet.
All right, well, thank you so much for presenting. Your poem was beautiful.
Yeah, sorry, we have one question in the Q&A if you would like to answer that, Alex. Caroline asked, you mentioned that you started off writing an essay and it turned into a poem. Did you ever finish the essay or just focus on the poem?
So I kind of took what was in the essay and made it into a poem. But I never actually finished the essay.
All right, if there are no more questions, thank you so much. The next person on the docket is Chloe Sun with her artwork entitled Flowers for Handcuffs, and she is from Carmel, Indiana. Oh, not this piece.
Good evening. Again, I'm Chloe Sun. I'm 16 and I'm a high school junior in Indiana. So I made this painting after just watching and listening to in July to the worldwide push for Black Lives Matter. And as we know, the Black community is disproportionately affected by gun violence at the hands of the police. And I looked around and people were tired of grieving for lives that didn't need to be lost, and tired of the lack of change that followed. So as a student stuck in quarantine with plenty of time to spare, I just felt like I needed to materialize my thoughts in my own way, which is through art. So this is Flowers for Handcuffs. It's an acrylic painting. It's based off a photo series by photographer William O'Hara in his coverage of the Black Lives Matter movement. So the story behind this painting centers around a kindergarten teacher. She was handing out flowers to law enforcement at a protest and was arrested for disobeying orders to disperse. And as you can see, after she was arrested, she left behind her flowers in the street. And her intention was just to make a statement saying that police will not tolerate even the most peaceful actions. And I wanted to bring the story to life on a canvas because these images really resonated for me, and the symbolism of the flowers just laying there in the street really just struck a chord. Um, the fact that such a pure act of peace and reaching out to the other side was met with handcuffs was powerful. And the continuation of police violence, even during the protests, has been disappointing, and it certainly says something. But as I try to be a good ally and use the privilege and the skills I have to bring awareness to these things, again, I just wanted to make a statement about the situation and amplify this woman's message. I think in general, as an artist, sure, it's great to make pretty things that are nice to look at, but I also think that artists have a unique gift that gives them the power to reach people visually beyond words. And as I navigate that sort of artivism, this subject just really drew me in, and I felt it was important to paint and important to share.
Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions? Chloe is monitoring the Q&A right now. I do have a question myself for you. So as I'm sure you may have seen or heard, in preparation for the election, they were boarding up windows in cities like DC, New York, things like that, because they feared the worst for protesting. But come the actual results of the election, we were met with cheers of joy. How does that kind of relate to the symbolism you talked about in this artwork here?
Well, I feel like a lot of people, when they were seeing these stores being boarded up again, a lot of people were equating it back to the protests. And I think that the election results definitely made history and gave a lot of relief to people who are in this fight, that there is a possibility of change. And it's nice to see that maybe on the same streets that these protests have been occurring now, that there are celebrations of the possibility of like a better future and more change. It's just nice to see.
Okay, and we have a few questions in the Q&A section. Alex is asking commenting, your art is so beautiful. How do you think art can be powerful in creating social change?
Yeah, thank you. Again, as I said, I just, as humans, visual things can also be very powerful. And I think it's special that, sorry, I think it's special that we can use visuals to tell stories that maybe words can't. So I think art is a good vehicle for that when words can't do the job.
Yes, I 100% agree with that. And we also have a question from Lorena. Does the man in purple have his hand on a gun?
Yes, he does.
Okay, and then one more comment from Susie. She said, "This acrylic painting hits a chord. Thank you."
Thank you. That means a lot.
I do have one more follow-up question. Similar to Alex, you're also very young. How did you initially get started in all of this, and where do you see it taking you?
I think, especially with school shootings as a student, every time I heard of one happening near me or just somewhere in the country, I would always think that could have been us. That could have been my school. That could have been my friends being affected and being hurt. And so, especially after Parkland, with the rise of March for Our Lives, I think that really did a good job of telling me that I really could start taking action now. So since then, I've been educating myself more. I've been participating in more organizations. Most recently, I also did some election work on just trying to recruit poll workers. But again, now that the election is over, I think just continuing to look at issues that I care about and look at issues that affect communities I care about. I think I'll just continue using my voice and my art to try and uplift those communities and uplift those voices and my voice.
Yeah, and we have one more question from Linda. She said, "Chloe, are you aware that the American suffragists often carried yellow flowers during their protests? Your art is wonderful. Thank you for sharing it with us."
I did not actually, so thank you for telling me that. And thank you for the compliment. But yeah, that's really interesting.
All right, if there are no further questions, we'll move on to the next artist. This is Emily Ann Reichart, who has a poem for us today entitled Angels from Dandelions. She is 16 years old and she is from Florida.
Hi, I'm Emily Ann. Okay. I'm Emily Ann, and this is my poem, Angels from Dandelions. So, 49 angels just passed by heaven's gates, glistening in body glitter and tears, and pleadful lives no longer theirs, lost in a grave mistaken for a nightclub. Death doesn't cause selfish hearts to ache, nor does it weigh down pockets filled with golden greed. Loss deem nothing of a monetary wealth. How do they fail to realize that deep pockets never outweigh the value of a single life? Yet selfish hearts have bought the silence of crowds with their never-tiring denials. Prayers mean nothing without a heart to back them up. Cannot be a paradox to passivity, nor can they reverse what continues to be done. Inaction will be the death of us all. The immoral politician plays gardener, who once watched children play. 6-year-old victims now suffer on his palm, as crushed dandelions with innocence intact. How the gardener let them wither, wilt from his insensitivity. Please withdraw the poison pesticide from which he waters them daily. NRA's death toll rose by 20 children that night. He said he'd pray for their lives, yet he watched the pesticidal policies grasp tighten, stronger and firmer, until the lungs shattered. Still, he had the audacity to gasp when dandelions turned to angels. When a flower is clipped, it could be pressed in a book, may be sold in another campaign speech. How can you bear profiting from a dandelion's wispy reminiscence? Enslaved by ideals of an outdated Second Amendment, he denied their pleas for pity. Plead for the dandelions buried in the field. Plead for the teary-eyed angels. Plead that it won't happen again. When money is involved, life ends too soon. They skip and dance in heaven's bliss, sing lullabies to the saints, murmuring of a day turned bad. Nearby, 49 angels listen in grief. Isn't it always too young to die? The gardener forged a tear, residing in a world so far from heaven, so far from bliss, so far from holy, so far from perfect, and hid a smile, for what is blood on his hands when his bank account is always full? A message for those in power. Make room in your pockets, for wilted, brown corpses of dandelions will stain your hands in crimson sins. Shameful. You can't hide your hands in your pockets, for the vacancy is filled with a surplus of gold. Hidden hands in pure white gloves, your death bleeds through cloth. Gloves only cover so much. Threatening to expose your hypocrisy, your past negligence will betray you, and you will plead for a life no longer yours. A life haunted by the cries of children, the deadly beat of a bass will ring in your ears, and you will cry. Your crimson-stained fingertips will grip petals in grief, not for their lives, nor for their loss, but for newly emptied pockets. You will lose your ghostly gold, as they have lost their lives. You will drink the poison of your own making, sip from the cup of hatred, for when weapons are brewed from evil, all will fall as dandelions in anguish. Thank you. So, yeah, that was my poem.
That was really beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing that. We really appreciate it. And we have a few questions from some people in the audience. The first question comes from Devin, and she asked, she said, "This gave me chills. How long did it take you to write it? Can you speak a little bit more about your process?"
Oh, okay, so I started writing it when I saw that you guys are having this art show, and it actually had like a few, like a lot of drafts, because my friend and I my friend and I both wrote poems for it, and then we both kept on going back to my creative writing teacher, Mr. Capley, and he kept on like editing it and telling us like what we need to revise it. And so my poem, I think I had like 3 drafts because it's so long, so many things that like we could fix or edit or like replace spots. And so yeah, it was a pretty, not like a super long process, but like it was like kind of long because there were a lot of editing and wanting it to be like as close like to perfect as it could be. So yeah.
Okay. Oh, were you saying something? Or...
Oh no, I was just gonna say that there's another question.
Yeah. So we have another question from Alex, and she said, "I loved hearing your poem. Thank you for sharing it. What inspired it?"
Oh, thank you. So, I live in Florida, but, and I live in Florida in like the Orlando, Kissimmee area. And so like, I live like pretty close to to where the Pulse shooting happened. Like we actually like passed by it a lot. And so like, I think seeing a shooting happen in like our community, like really impacted us. Cause like we saw that it could happen to anyone. And so that is like what inspired the poem, because like I mentioned that specific shooting a lot, like the 49 angels passed by heaven's gates and like how they're in heaven now and it's always too young to die. And so I think that really inspired it, just because like it happened like in Orlando, like where I live. So yeah, and like I'm a part of the March for Life chapter at my school. And so we do a lot of activism there anyway, because like our community has actually been impacted from like gun violence, like so many communities like, across America. And so I feel like it really inspired me just to write a poem about it and to have my voice heard. Yeah.
Okay. And we have one more question. Thank you for sharing that, by the way. Alex asked again, "I also noticed you use dandelions as a metaphor. Could you explain more about that, how that ties into the meaning of the poem?"
Well, I use dandelions because that's what I chose to describe like the children as who have been like impacted by shootings. And so I chose dandelion because like flowers are so like beautiful and like so fragile. And so it's kind of like they exist in such beauty and people love them, and yet they get crushed and picked and pressed in books, and so like they get damaged or hurt, and then instead of like acting upon that and saying like, oh my gosh, this dandelion was clipped, like someone who's immoral, like a politician or a wealthy person who only cares about the money, will press it in a book. And so I kind of wanted to use like that symbolism where like the dandelion is fragile and like children are like fragile and innocent. Yeah.
Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you so much for that. Before we move on, actually, there's one thing I just kind of wanted to point out that I thought was interesting is the use of like yellow flowers, both in two of our pieces here and throughout history, according to one of our lovely commenters. I guess that's not really a question for anyone in particular, but just something to muse on. The next artist we have for tonight is Katie Selfie. She is a professional artist from the Ithaca area, and she is presenting 3 pieces for us tonight.
Hi there, I'm Katie Selfie, and I'm in Ithaca, and I have been making work about gun violence in America since 2012. This first piece that's up was the first piece that I painted, and it was right after Trayvon Martin was shot and killed. And I didn't know what to do as an artist. I've been an artist for many years, and I felt like I needed to do something. So I decided to paint the actual gun that was used in the shooting. And I painted the silhouette of the gun in red, and then in white and blue, I wrote the information about the gun, the make and the model, and what the gun was used for. In this case, this gun was used to kill Trayvon Martin. And then a couple months later, the Sandy Hook shooting happened. And I decided to paint that gun in the same, it's actually, I think, the 5th slide, in the same manner. There were a few guns used in that shooting, but I chose this one, and I painted the gun in silhouette, and I took the information about the gun and wrote it in the same way with the white colored pencil and blue colored pencil. This gun was used to kill 26 people at Sandy Hook. And I then had a show, and I ended up building a body of work called Red Guns, which was about mass shootings in schools. And this was the first piece. And I ended with the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, which is the next gun in the slideshow. And my daughter was the same age as the Sandy Hook kids. So when that shooting happened, it was just all I could do to figure out how could I add to this discussion about gun violence. And I decided that I had to paint these guns. And so I didn't paint every school shooting, but I did most of them in the last, I actually started with a 1966 shooting in Austin, Texas, and ended with the Marjorie Stoneman. So I've done 17 different guns in that series. And then I also, with the gun about Trayvon Martin, I created a series called Black Lives Matter, and have painted different guns used to kill Black men at this point. And I hope to expand on that and also paint guns that have been used to kill Black women. I've also done guns that have been used to kill women in this country, and it's called Every 16 Hours, because every 16 hours a woman is shot and killed in this country. And the whole body of work is actually called SNAFU, which stands for Situation Normal All Fucked Up. And within that, all of these smaller bodies of work fit into that. And I guess there's a few more slides if you go back. It shows, I think, 4 different pieces from the Black Lives Matter series. And what I'm doing is I'm painting the gun in red. So from a distance, it is kind of blingy in a way. If you walk into a room and you see it, you might kind of be attracted to seeing the gun image. Some people are really into gun imagery. And you walk up to it and then you see the writing, which is much smaller and in some cases harder to see because it's with white writing or very light writing. But then you read the information and it really plays with the perspective of the viewer. And I'm also thinking conceptually the perspective of the subject matter. Sometimes when you're closer to a subject, it's harder or easier to see it. Vice versa, sometimes when you're farther away, it's harder or easier to see it. And I think that there's so much wrapped into the gun violence issue in this country. And we need, someone asked about being a visual artist making work about gun violence. And I feel like we need all different mediums. We need people talking about it in the news. We need to write about it. We need to write poetry about it. We need to paint about it. We need to talk about it. And there's so much that needs to be said about this subject, and we need to keep people's attention. And I think that's what I've also seen is that when there is a shooting, people pay attention for a week, 2 weeks, maybe a little longer since the March for Our Lives, actually, which is really amazing. But we need all these different mediums to be constantly circulating so we can all be reminded. So anyway, that's my work.
Thank you so much for speaking on that. And we have a few questions from the Q&A. I'm going to start with Lorena, who's asking, are the guns painted to size? Also, why did you decide to paint on wood?
They're all painted to scale. Great question, I forgot to say that. And I painted on wood initially because I had access to a lot of wood, but I also thought about the material and thought, I don't want, even though the subject matter is so precious, I don't want to paint on something very precious, even though wood is very beautiful and I love the grain, and in some cases there's knots in the wood and it looks like a bullet hole. So it started to really work beautifully with the subject matter and the imagery, but initially I had access to a lot of wood and I knew that I didn't want to use very, very precious material.
Okay, thank you for answering that. And the next question is from Alex, as she asks, I think that seeing the silhouette of a gun is so impactful. Why did you choose to portray the art in that specific way?
I initially was going to paint a very detailed image of the gun. I knew I wanted to paint the gun. I wanted to show the tool that is used over and over again to kill, students or Black men or Black women or, whoever is being killed. I really wanted to focus in on the tool. And in this case, it's the gun. And for me, the easiest way to paint it was the side view. And instead of getting all detailed, it didn't matter about the details. It's just that the silhouette of the gun is powerful and you know exactly what it is. And I mean, and some people know what type of gun it is before they even read the make and model because they know so much about guns. So I thought that was more impactful. Plus I was playing on the red, white, and blue. This is the American way kind of feeling with writing with white and blue and then painting the gun red.
Okay, and I have my own personal question for you too. I was wondering, what do you hope people feel when they look at your work?
I hope they feel like thinking about what these guns mean, because I think what I've noticed with a lot of people seeing this work, it's been shown in galleries and in New York City, it's been shown in Ithaca, it's been shown kind of all over the country. And at times I've had opportunity to talk to people, and a lot of people at first, when they see the gun, they actually are really attracted to it, and they think it looks really cool or blingy. The gun violence against women guns are painted with nail polish in a really colorful way. They're actually really pretty in a way. So people are kind of excited by them. And then when they read the information, they're completely tricked and stunned. And then they're kind of in a way forced to think. And so I guess my hope is that it'll create a conversation, because it's just a fact. You can't argue with anything that's written on there or presented visually. So I'm just hoping that it'll create a dialogue.
Katie, your work is really amazing. I just have a question regarding your piece about Stefan Clark, I think.
Oh yeah.
I was just curious to learn more about that one, because I noticed that one was a little different than some of the other pieces. So I was just curious about what was different about that one.
Yeah, so that one was the last gun that I painted in that series, Black Lives Matter. And I also had just finished the body of work that's about violence against women. And with the work that I made about the violence against women, I started pairing the gun with a constellation. So as if, like, going back to Greek mythology, kind of a way to keep the story of the person that has been killed alive in the stars and constellations. And so I did that with this piece because I had finished the body of work about women, and I decided to paint this gun. And so I think it's Pisces. I can't actually see what it is, but that's the constellation. That's Stephen Clark's constellation. So that's where that ends up being a little bit different. And then I think the marks on the left of the gun are how many times he was shot. And all the color is spray paint. It's spray paint and then nail polish making the constellations. So it's slightly different materials.
I know you mentioned for your women's pieces that nail polish was like a big one of your main mediums that you used. Is there any specific reason why you decided to integrate it into this piece as well?
I had been using the nail polish, and I actually used makeup, not just nail polish, for the violence against women guns. So I used eyeshadow and blush and lipstick and nail polish. But the nail polish actually worked beautifully to make the stars. And so I continued to use the nail polish in this work. I could have just used any kind of paint that made sense, but since I already knew that the nail polish worked the way I wanted it to, I continued to use that in this piece.
I just have one final question too. You said that obviously you were an artist, right? So do you have any other pieces of work that you focus on, or has this been your primarily focused?
I've been making work for 35 years or something, 30 years. And I have made work about many different subjects, some political, like this work. I've made work about poaching animals illegally. I've made work about crude oil and war. But I've also made a lot of other work that is just much more maybe autobiographical and, quite honestly, more I wouldn't say more beautiful, but just easier on the eye, easier on the subject matter. And I balance it out. I do both because if I just do this work, I honestly, by the end of, I made gun violence work for 8 years, and I was so depressed after doing that for so long. I had to stop completely for a while, but I also just balance it out and make work about other subjects that have nothing to do with politics. and you know, these really hard subjects.
All right, well, if there are no more questions, thank you so very much. That was very illuminating, and it was very interesting to see your point of view and like the changing of your work over time. And really thank you to all of the panelists who have been here tonight and who have displayed their work. It's been truly so wonderful and motivating and inspiring to see the range of ages and skill and medium. It's truly impressive. So I unfortunately don't have any art to show you tonight, but I do have a little bit of a speech that I'd like to share with you all. So thank you from the bottom of my heart for everyone who has attended tonight. I am truly so honored to speak with you all tonight, and I'm deeply humbled by your support and your presence. This event has been a year in the making, and it has taken on a life of its own throughout the process. For so long, our executive board, myself, and some of the people you see tonight, others in our gallery tonight, we've invested so much of our time. We've lived and breathed art show, so much so that this endeavor really has become a part of our identity, a capstone of our experience with March for Our Lives and with each other. Some of these people have become my dearest friends who I'm so grateful to have in my life. But reflecting on that, there's so many people who never get to see the fruits of their labor. They had their bountiful futures ripped from their hands and will never know what impact they could have made on the world. When I was preparing for this event, I originally set out to paint a picture to display in the gallery. Kind of similar to Katie's artwork, my initial concept was going to feature a gun. A basic handgun, small and silver gleamed, but from the tip of the nozzle, it would pour out red painted handprints, representing the lives lost to senseless gun violence. But as the event quickly approached, I found myself unable to produce such a piece. I ran out of time. I didn't have the motivation. The concept was too ambitious. Ultimately, it never got completed. But that is so contradictory to the plight of March for Our Lives and of activism in general. If we allow ourselves to be overcome by our own personal negligence, how will we ever accomplish what needs to get done? How will we ever generate the change necessary in this world? How will we ever see an end to senseless and vicious violence if we do not actively seek to advocate against it and educate others? I regret not being able to complete that piece, but instead, I want to leave you with this poem. You won't find it displayed on our screen here or in the gallery. Rather, I want it to serve as a private moment amongst friends. The text is written by poet Maya Jackson. What would we do if we didn't have the privilege of being distracted? I know we must honor our personal lives. I know we must not live in darkness. I know we must celebrate the grace in our humanity to keep our lungs from collapsing. We must breathe in hope. And so have I, taken in joy and beauty and selfishness and frivolity and laughter. We are wonderful humans. We find the light. But I fear the moment passing, already distracted from the fire, though the smoke is still filling our lungs. This is going to sound wrong, but I hope this pain lasts. I hope that it holds. I don't want to heal just yet. We have become experts at recovery. I hope we become expert at revolution. Thank you for listening. I will take any questions that anyone may have.
Can I just say something? I don't know if the other artists that didn't speak but submitted work are in the more your age group or my age group, but I just have to say how impressed I am with all the work that has been talked about tonight. And thank you for putting this on. And you guys are just an awesome generation and an inspiration.
Thank you so much for those kind words. It's been really interesting to see. We were talking about it a bit before that there's such a dichotomy between the generations and seeing where the young people have really taken hold of this and moved forward and are really finding themselves in this activist world where other generations haven't been able to get the same foothold. So thank you for noting that.
Yeah.
Susie Owens in the Q&A typed, "I'm V inspired."
Okay, so we are just waiting on David Hogg. He should be here any moment now. So in the meantime, I can put the gallery back up and we can look at some of the pieces that were not presented tonight. But we do have quite an array of pieces. Unfortunately, we can't talk to them as well as the artists themselves could, but they're definitely worth taking a look at now. Just give me one moment to pull that back up. The exhibit's going to be running until the end of December, so feel free to look at the art anytime you may like. There's all of the pieces that were displayed tonight, as well as a few in addition. So this piece is called Senpova by the artist Ali Mason, who is from Albany, New York, and it is a mixed media medium.
I can maybe talk a little bit about what the meaning of that piece is, just based on what they submitted, if that would be good. Okay, yeah, so just based on what they submitted, they weren't able to attend tonight. But I think it's basically what they were trying to accomplish with this piece was the inability to help people affected by gun violence, despite how much we as a generation, as just we as society might want to. And so I think they were trying to get at the struggle of trying to help people when it may be beyond our reach.
So this piece is entitled Am I Next? By the artist Ali Brault from Wisconsin, New York. The medium is digital photograph. While we don't have the speech provided by the artist, one thing I noted when looking at this is it's very similar to, or it kind of evokes a similar chord to the piece called A Girl in a Red Jacket or Girl in a Red Coat, which is from the movie Schindler's List. The next piece we have here is Postcard 3 by artist Allison P. Waring from East Setauket, New York. The medium is digital collage.
And Ali is actually our graphic designer. She made the poster for the show. She is an incredible artist, but you probably, if you see any of the posters that we make, they're all made by her, but she can even do things that go beyond that medium. And when I saw this, I was amazed. But yeah, she's also a student at Binghamton with us. So yeah, just so much great work. But yeah, I thought this was really cool. I can maybe talk a little bit about what the meaning is if people would be interested in that. I think I have a little blurb from Ali. So Ali said, okay. I think it was for a class. I don't have that much info about it, but I think it was for a class and she decided to do about gun violence, but I don't have the specifics about the meaning, but it's really great. It's amazing.
Susie also posted in the Q&A, I see the color red is often used in the pieces.
All right, and I do believe we have another poem as well, which I can read for the audience now. The poem is entitled Timeline of a Lifetime of Tragedy. Newtown, Connecticut, December 2012. A man kills his mother. He walks into a classroom of first graders and shoots them where they stand. I am 11 years old. It's the beginning of the end. Orlando, Florida, June 2016. A man shoots up a gay bar. Men and women hide in the bathroom and pray they won't be found. I am 14 years old. I realize I am unsafe because of who I love. Las Vegas, Nevada, October 2017. A man rains terror on a concert. People run for cover and cry as the maelstrom goes on indefinitely. I am 15 years old. Music is no longer safe. Parkland, Florida, February 2018. A child goes to school and shoots at his classmates and friends. Those left fight back, but no one seems to care. I am 16 years old. I realize that the world does not care if I live or die. United States of America, October 2020. I watch tragedy after preventable tragedy. I am told to think and pray. I am 18 years old. Hundreds have died and nothing has changed. All right, well, since we are still missing David, unfortunately, how about we go ahead with Chloe and wrap this up a little bit.
Okay. So, hi, everyone. This is really amazing. We have, I don't think anyone can see this besides the people who are on the panel, but we have about 35 people here right now in total, which is incredible. And I just really appreciate everyone for showing up. And I just wanted to say a little bit. So, hi, everyone. My name is Chloe Levine, and I'm a junior here at Binghamton University. I've had the pleasure of serving on the media and production team of March for Our Lives BU since my freshman year of college when our chapter was founded. I remember Bennett and I had our first call to discuss ideas for a potential art show about a year ago. As Julia has said before, what started as an idea to have an in-person show gradually morphed into what we're witnessing today, a fully developed website and webinar where we're lucky enough to have one of the co-founders of March for Our Lives, David Hogg, who will be speaking with us shortly, and artists from all across the country who have poured their hearts into souls in creating work to inspire us all. I vividly remember the first time I heard the name March for Our Lives, around February of 2018. As a senior in high school at the time, gun violence in the United States was never a topic that had really come to my mind. It wasn't until learning about the events in Parkland, Florida, that I realized how entrenched this epidemic was in our country. It showed me that I was not immune to these issues, and just how close gun violence can really hit to home. Scott Beagle, a geography teacher at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas, fell victim to the acts of violence that day. He graduated from my very high school. He walked the same halls as me. He spent 4 years of his life in the same place as me, and his parents still reside in my hometown of Dix Hills on Long Island today. How do I know this could not be me in the future? It wasn't until it was after this, along with many others, that I realized that I could no longer sit idly by while innocent lives were being taken at the hand of a weapon, thus leading me to join this incredible team as the physical artist freshman year. Now, it's really important that we discuss how art and activism are intersected with one another. There's a quote I found from a man by the name of Caesar Cruz that I feel sums this up perfectly. He said, "Art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable." Using art as a form of activism not only grabs one's attention, but it sends a message. It makes a statement. It allows us the ability to express the need for social change, not through speech, but through poetry, through paint, canvas, and creativity. Long after protests are over, art will resonate. March for Our Lives is no stranger to using art as a form of activism. There have been examples of murals, banners, signs, posters, exhibits in DC, and countless others that have been created with the goal of harnessing youth across this country to not only fight for sensible gun violence prevention, but to ultimately save lives in the process. Just as March for Our Lives is no stranger to art in their activism, our city of Binghamton, New York is no stranger to gun violence. On April 3rd of 2009, a man, whose name I will not say, walked into Binghamton's local immigration center, the American Civic Association, and killed 14 innocent people. At the time that it occurred, it was the deadliest mass shooting in the United States since Virginia Tech. The building, located in downtown Binghamton, is only 8 minutes away from our main campus. For anyone that goes to Binghamton U, you've probably passed this building on Front Street numerous times without realizing the events that actually took place there. I believe that this, more than anything, can show us that gun violence truly has no boundaries, from schools to concerts to cities to immigration centers. And thus, over 9 years later, our Binghamton chapter was born. Since founding, we've been able to host voter registration events, written letters to our senators, hosted debate watches, collaborated with numerous other clubs, and have also tried to inform our fellow students of these very issues. Like I said before, I want to just briefly thank everyone who decided to attend this and everyone that's taking the time to listen to us. Of course, all the incredible artists as well that poured their talent into this show. Without them, our vision would never have been a possibility. The virtual gallery, as Julia said, will be viewable for some time until December. I urge you all to go look at the work there, even after this event is over. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chloe. Can I just ask one question? You mentioned during your speech how about the gun violence in Binghamton. You said how you wouldn't say the name of the perpetrator. Can you just talk a little bit about why you decided not to say the person's name?
Yeah. I feel that a lot of news networks also do the same thing when talking about gun violence and the perpetrator, and I feel that saying their name, it just gives them the notoriety that they want from these from committing these actions.
Thank you. I think that's something that gun violence prevention activists have been advocating for. I think they said no notoriety. That's what we're trying to advocate for, because we want to make it about the victims. We don't want to talk about, we don't want to glorify the person anyway or make them notable. So thank you.
All right, so without further ado, we'd like to introduce David Hogg. He is one of the co-founding members of March for Our Lives. And he is a wonderful activist, and he has taken time out of his busy schedule to speak with us today, and we are so grateful to have him. So take it away, thank you.
How long do you guys want me to speak? Sorry, I just wanted to be clear on that, because I will go on forever, and I don't want to do that too.
We've typically been doing about 10 minutes each, but take as much time as you need, honestly. We're very excited to hear you speak.
Yeah, well, thank you, first of all, for having me on and putting this together. I think the way that I kind of think about, 1 second, I'm sorry, my sister just texted me and I got to respond to this. Sorry about that, you know, siblings. Okay, sorry, I've really bad reception in my house too. Is it good now though? Okay, yeah, so I just wanted to say, I think it's really amazing that that all of you are doing the work on art. I think one thing that, frankly, that I care a lot about, that I think should be talked about more, is there's a lot of like this idea of, you know, performative activism going around right now that I personally see myself as really toxic, because I think it's a very privileged standpoint that a lot of people have, to assume that a lot of people, you know, don't have multiple jobs, that they have to work sometimes. You know, activism, I say a lot of the time, activism is not voluntary, because it's really for our community's survival at times. You know, because every community in the United States is affected to some degree by gun violence. But I think it's important for all of us as young people to recognize that no matter who's in the movement, it's not about judging someone based off of how much they give or how much they don't give or anything like that. It's about giving all that you can, and being thankful for the people that you're around in whatever way they choose to contribute. Some of us are really great organizers. Some of us are really great orators. Some of us are, you know, really great artists. I'm definitely not a great artist, but I see that it's really impactful. I've seen it myself across the country. You know, one thing that I think about, that I think the gun violence prevention movement takes I would say a considerable amount of inspiration from, is ACT UP and a lot of HIV/AIDS activism. And one thing that they did was the creation of the AIDS quilt, which is basically people that had died, you know, people that had lost loved ones from HIV/AIDS. They made quilts that were the same dimensions as a casket, and they turned it into this massive quilt that's thousands of feet long. And I highly recommend any of you that have the honor of going to see it in person to definitely see it. Because when I first saw it, it shows you the scale of the cost of HIV/AIDS in the United States. And I think importantly, especially for these issues that are currently seen as political, but ultimately cost lives. We have to make them human. Because I can tell you right now, what is not going to change this issue as much as I wish it would is going to be screaming or yelling statistics in people's faces. What will change it is going to be, frankly, young people, I think, and everyday people getting really pissed off and righteously angry and having a large amount of righteous indignation around the injustice that causes gun violence. And importantly, we shouldn't be trying to tell the story of 40,000 people that die every year from gun violence, although all of their stories matter. When we speak only in terms of numbers about these things, I think it gets lost in the statistics. That's why I think art is really important, because it tells the story of one individual that then can help amplify it out to the 40,000 that die annually from gun violence. I think it's helpful because it brings other people into the movement too. If say you're a quiet person and you don't want to, go to protest or organize or anything like that, so long as somebody is contributing in some way, that's something for us to be thankful for, right? And we shouldn't be necessarily comparing ourselves to others. We should just be trying as hard as we can and understanding that, sometimes people have family things that go on in their houses that you may not be aware of. Sometimes people have mental health issues and they're really trying their best, and we should expect that from each other, but also not judge each other because we assume somebody isn't as trying as hard as they possibly could, while still encouraging everybody to go, as hard as they can. But importantly, we really need to preserve we need to realize that in activism, it is a radical act for us to take care of ourselves, because of the trauma that drive these issues, but it's essential that we do so. For example, today, I actually took most of my day off to go on a hike and go fishing, like an hour outside of DC where I am right now. And it was great, just because, we're after the election and stuff. We have a lot of work ahead though, but I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at, is that it's really important for you to realize that self-care is not selfish. It is part of your productivity, and it is essential for you to do so because you were part of the movement. And if you're not taking care of yourself, you're harming those around you, because then they have to, take away from their other work to take care of you. And if you're taking care of yourself, you're taking care of the movement. And I think those are some of the reasons why the art is so powerful. I think it also, one of the other main reasons that it is so powerful is because I truly believe that political power, of course, exists, but really what is at the base of political power more than anything, and why I think young people have so much potential to create change, is that young people dictate what is cool a lot of the time. We dictate what our culture focuses on. And what we see is when social movements happen, and culture starts to change faster than political parties, frankly, a lot of elected officials get really scared. And that's when things really start to change. I think it's sad, but frankly, I think for 98% of politicians, the only good politician is a scared one. And we got to scare them with our vote. We got to scare them by organizing. We got to scare them by creating, as John Lewis talked about, good trouble. And working across our communities to recognize, although some communities may have experienced mass shootings, and that's the main way that they've experienced gun violence, other communities may have experienced, a disproportionate amount of gun suicides that are 2/3 of gun deaths. Others may have experienced everyday acts of gun violence. It's not about comparing each other's trauma. It's about asking each other's communities how we can work in a kind of mutual aid way to support each other as good allies, and recognize that although communities across the United States are all different, we all can recognize that none of us want to live in a world so full of gun violence anymore. But yeah, the last thing that I want to focus on is that I think an essential part of that self-care, and as a result, the success of the movement, is going to come from art, because it gives people hope and it gives people community. And when we are in our darkest places, when we feel like we can't go any further and we need to take a step back to survive the societal friction and the controversy that social movements create, it is on all of us, especially young people, to redefine our own communities, because we are not going to get the validation that we need oftentimes from our neighbors or those within physical proximity of us. So we have to redefine kind of, even at times, what our, I guess you could say, activism family is. And a great way of doing that is forming a collective culture around this art to bring hope, and remember that none of us are alone in this fight. I want everyone on this call to know that, however you're feeling, I don't feel hopeful all the time. I've felt a lot more hopeful lately. But I don't feel hopeful all the time, and that's okay. That's totally valid. Sometimes I can't even get up and do anything that day, just because, sometimes PTSD and stuff is like that. but I know that because we have amazing people in March and stuff, that they're doing the work. And in the times when they need to step back, like, I'm there doing the work too, and realize just, none of this is completely on you. It's really about all of us working together. And I think ultimately what it comes down to is forming the beloved community that Dr. King talked about, the civil rights movement, and addressing the evils of society of militarism, racism, and poverty that I would argue are some of the biggest contributing factors to gun violence in the United States. Of course, gun laws matter, but we also need to focus on why are communities, why do young people in communities feel the need to pick up a gun in the first place? And a lot of the time it's because they don't have good after school programs. It's because, local municipalities are a lot more willing to fund millions of dollars into police watchtowers than to just, actually give kids the proper resources and tutoring and support at school, or fight for, a good high-paying jobs and union jobs and stuff like that to support their families. And it's on all of us to humbly ask how we can help each other's communities. And I think art is a really great way of doing that, because it makes this issue what it really is, which is not a political one, it's a human one of a tremendous human cost. And it is healing for many people, especially, I think, including people like myself that are not necessarily very artistically talented. But I appreciate all of you so much, and I am so thankful for the work that you're doing. And know that none of you are alone in this fight. There's no chapter that is alone. There's no individual that is alone. I'm here. We're here. Our generation is here. I mean, Donald Trump was literally such a bad president. He basically he reignited four major historic social movements, and we literally just had the highest youth voter turnout pretty much in American history. And we cannot stop now, though. Joe Biden is a good step in it's a good way of stopping going as fast backwards as we otherwise would have been. But we got a lot more work to do. We got to start rebuilding. Shit like at the local level, at the state level, and the federal level too, and focusing on getting progressive candidates and candidates that not only support gun violence prevention, but recognize the role of economic and racial and environmental and just overall injustice and the role of white supremacy in gun violence in the United States. I'm truly humbled to be here and to be with all of you, to know that it's honestly it's just healing for me too, to know that I'm not the only young person in this, even though we're over Zoom and stuff. But thank you, seriously.
Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us. We really, really appreciate it. And yeah, we're all obviously just really honored to have you here and be looking at everyone's work and everything. If everyone that is here wants to ask some questions in the chat, we can kind of open it up into a little Q&A. You can ask David, you can ask any of the panelists that are here. But again, thank you a lot for coming and taking the time to speak with us.
Yeah.
Okay. So we have a few questions from different people thus far. The first person is Alex. She said, "Thank you so much for speaking, David. You've been one of my inspirations for becoming an activist and truly show me young people can make a difference. I'm feeling even more excited to make change happen." Not a question, but yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. And then in the chat, Samantha has two questions. She asked, what advice would you offer future educators who want to make activism a priority in their future classroom?
I think part of what I would talk about is realizing, like, people don't just up and decide that they're activists one day most of the time. It's that something really messed up happens, and people have to organize, like, for their survival. Activism, the level of activism in society is not a sign of how good society is doing. It's a sign of how poorly it is doing, because activism in a perfect world would not be necessary. But I think a great way of bringing it in is talking to young people about just being a supportive educator. I think is a big role. And what I mean by that is, like, listening to students and, the things that are going on with them, and helping to, letting them know how they can advocate for themselves. I know some kids at, schools often don't know that they can even talk to their principal at all, or talk to any of the administration about changing some kind of policy or something, which is really hard a lot of the time. But you know, just doing that. I think another good way is when you're going through, if you're teaching history or something, teaching about the role, especially frankly, that young women play in social movements. I think that one of the wildest things that I've seen is I think throughout American history, and probably it's the same way in most societies, I would imagine, I think about 80% of the organizers that I've met are like AFAM, or, you know, female identifying, or non-binary. Many of them are Black and brown, many of them are LGBTQ, and they don't make it in our history books a lot of the time because our history books are written by a lot of white men, and hopefully that's changing. But I would definitely highlight the actual people, for example, the Stonewall riot, like the Black and brown, like trans women that like led that, and how like even today in our media, like, you know, the framing of the entire movie around that like replay or completely erased a lot of those people. And I think just helping show young people that they can create that change. I think in regards to school library, like books, which I think was part of the question too, I'm not completely sure, because a lot of the books that I've read are like basically encyclopedias on like gun violence and policy, stuff like that, which isn't like super exciting. But I think a really good one is like the Nelson Mandela's, I think it's like his autobiography, The Long Walk to Freedom. I found that really interesting and inspiring. It's a long read. Let me look at, one I would recommend too is Switch, which is basically a behavioral economics like book that talks about how social change is made in organizations and society. I'm just looking at my bookcase for some of my books right now. There's a really interesting one called Suburban Warriors that one of my professors wrote. It's about conservative organizing actually, but it's fascinating because it talks about how through primarying, like the modern conservative movement was born in Orange County in California, the Barry Goldwater campaign. It's really scary, but it's important to know some of the tactics of the other side and where they actually like came from a historical perspective. I don't agree with them at all ideologically. They have a lot of really problematic and white nationalist and imperialist views. But say what you will, but they did know how to organize, and they still do. And lastly, one that I would recommend that might be a little too like radical for school libraries, but it's just, you know, it's because we're talking about our actual history, is a book by an Indigenous studies professor that I'm now in contact with named Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, called Loaded: Disarming the History of the Second Amendment. And it basically talks about the role of white supremacy and slavery and imperialism and indigenous genocide in the United States in the Second Amendment, and how the well-regulated militia part of the Second Amendment went from indigenous death squads for westward imperial expansion from the 13 colonies to eventual slave patrols, and then evolved into our modern day policing systems. But yeah, that's probably what I would recommend. I can probably answer like one more question because I have to go in a minute, but.
Okay. All right. So Julia asked, do you think there's means to inspire change without it being a result of some cataclysmic event?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think activism isn't only related to things that are, you know, where people die and stuff. It can be related to small stuff at your school too. But I think sadly, because there's so many of these things that have happened, you can, I would never underestimate the power of a really well, you know, I like orating a lot, and giving speeches and stuff, but I would never underestimate the power of another young person rallying up other angry young people to create some good trouble and, you know, do some protesting or voter registration and stuff. And one thing I would recommend to all of you too is like, it's great that we had a really high youth voter turnout in this election, but for me, it's like we need to vote, but we can't just leave it at that. We need to continue to organize. We need to continue to mobilize. We need to continue to ask, you know, other community members how we can help them, you know, when their communities face injustice in a humble way, not as white saviors, you know, but simply ask how we can be helpful, and recognize that as Americans, it's our responsibility to care, it's every American's responsibility to have compassion for other people, including those that may not look like, our communities, wherever other Americans may come from. But yeah, I think, yeah.
Okay. Do you have time for more, or?
I do have to go, but I just wanted to say to all of you, realize I think it really comes down to routine. Social movements are like my metaphor is always that political campaigns are like a quick 100-meter sprint. Social movements are like being told to run across the United States with no map, being told to run from like New York to LA, but having no idea where Los Angeles is and no map. So you need to conserve your energy and go as quickly as we can, but also pace yourself, because and I hope we don't have to be, but we need to be prepared to be in this fight for decades to come. And you need to be feeling not necessarily every day, because you won't always feel the same, but you need to feel generally that if you had to, you could do this for decades to come, because we really got to pace ourselves and make sure that we are, gun violence is not going to end in one election. As much as I wish it would, it's not. Even with Joe Biden as president, shootings are going to continue. Extrajudicial killings are going to continue. And we have to push local candidates and everyday people to continue to mobilize. And the great thing is, though, that we have the possibility to do it. In 2018, young people turned out in huge numbers. And 2020, we turned out literally basically the highest rate ever in American history. And if at this rate, we can turn our generation into a political juggernaut. But we need to continue to mobilize. We need to organize. And frankly, eventually, I think it's going to come down to every one of us that can, learning how to not be the quote unquote leaders that we currently have, and eventually running against them and replacing them to be the leaders that they never were. So, yeah. Also, I forget who I was emailing. It might have been Bennett, but just email me the art too, or DM me the art so I can post it on my story for you guys if you have it. I love you all. You're really amazing.
Thank you.
And keep up the fight. Seriously, it's only by everyday people like us that don't think that they're ever going to be involved in activism at times that change really does come. And it's not going to come from a place of it's not about being tolerant of the intolerant, but it's about creating an actually tolerant world, if that makes sense, for everyone. So let's keep it up. Let's keep kicking ass. And also, if you can, I don't know, take a break this weekend, or this week or next weekend, and then let's get back to work, because we got a lot of work ahead of us still. So seriously, thank you all. It is only because of people like you that any of this is possible.
Thank you. We really appreciate you coming, and I know a lot of people in the chat are saying the same, so thank you.
Yeah, of course. And reach out to me anytime you need. I'm here. Okay, bye.
Okay, I think that pretty much wraps it up for the art show. I hope everyone enjoyed seeing everyone's art. I know it was really great for me to just see everyone's art and hear them talk about it, and obviously to hear David speak. But yeah, thank you so much. Everyone, you deserve to take a break. We've worked hard, so take his advice. Let's take a break, but amazing job. And all of your work was incredible. Seriously, I'm so impressed. But yeah, if you want to check out the art gallery, I just put it in the chat. It'll be available until the end of December. So just go to mfolnewyork.org. So yeah, thanks so much, guys. I think that pretty much ends it. And we'll put this recording up on YouTube, I believe, or we'll share with the attendees.